Wang Yibo finally broke his silence about Xiao Zhan, the question that silenced the entire fandom, the question that trended across platforms faster than any controversy in recent memory, was deceptively simple yet heavy enough to divide the internet in an instant. Why did Wang Yibo choose this moment, after months of speculation, shifting rumors, and the constant shadow of the past, to finally speak up about his connection, his distance, and his unspoken history with Xiao Zhan? For months, fans believed he would continue maintaining that cool exterior of mystery, the trademark silence he used whenever the noise around him grew too loud. Yet today, for reasons only he truly understood, he stepped into the light and addressed the one topic that everyone thought he would never touch again. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update in the world of your favorite celebrities. It began quietly, not with a press conference or a public statement, but with a single recorded interview in a dimly lit studio, the kind of setup designed to strip away theatrics and reveal the raw truth beneath the polished surface. The lights were softened, the cameras positioned inches from his face, and Wang Yibo sat with a calmness so intense it was almost unnerving, as though he had been preparing for this conversation far longer than anyone realized. His posture was straight, his hands folded loosely in his lap, his eyes steady and unflickering, giving the impression of a man who had already wrestled with his thoughts in private and finally reached a place of unshakable resolve. The interviewer began cautiously, circling the topic with measured steps, aware that anything said in this moment could ripple across the industry for months. But Yibo did not wait for the perfect lead-in. Instead, he leaned slightly forward, his voice low, steady, and uncharacteristically open, shattering the silence before it could tighten around the room. He acknowledged that the speculation, the rumors, and the narratives built around his relationship with Xiao Zhan had grown far beyond what either of them could control, turning into a monolith of expectations that neither man had asked for yet both had been forced to carry. He spoke slowly, allowing each word to land with the weight of truth, explaining that the industry had a way of turning simple partnerships into mythology, of weaving stories where none existed and drowning the real human emotions beneath layers of fan fiction and manufactured conflict. He admitted that he and Xiao Zhan had shared a bond built on mutual respect and a deep understanding of the pressures they were under, a bond that had formed naturally during the most intense period of their careers. He did not deny their closeness, nor did he inflate it into something dramatic for the cameras. Instead, he described it as something rare, two people navigating the same storm, standing on different ships but always waving to each other across the waves. What stunned the entire room, however, was not his acknowledgement of their relationship but the quiet vulnerability in his next words. He revealed that there came a moment, known only to the two of them, when silence became necessary, not because of conflict, not because of distance, but because the world had turned their friendship into a battleground. He admitted that stepping back had been painful, a decision forced by circumstance, one that carried its own quiet grief. And yet the respect remained, the gratitude remained, the understanding remained, even if it no longer lived under the relentless microscope of public attention. The interviewer, sensing the depth of what had been revealed, asked whether he regretted anything, regretted the silence, the distance, the way things had unfolded. For a long moment, Yibo did not speak. His jaw tightened slightly, his gaze dropped toward the floor, and the room held its breath as the weight of unspoken memories pressed against him. When he finally looked up, his answer arrived with a clarity that pierced straight through the noise. He said that regret was a luxury people in their position could not afford, because everything they did was watched, recorded, interpreted, and repurposed until the truth became unrecognizable. Instead of regret, he said, he held something more fragile and more meaningful, gratitude for the chapter they shared, for the support they offered each other, for the moments of laughter that fans never saw, and for the quiet mutual promise that no matter where life pulled them, there would always be a space carved out of memory where their paths had crossed at exactly the right time. Outside the studio, the world erupted instantly. Fans who had waited months for clarity felt their emotions surge in a tidal wave of relief, heartbreak, and renewed devotion. Clips from the interview spread within minutes, translators around the world rushed to interpret every word, and analysts began dissecting the tone, the pauses, the meaning behind each sentence. Xiao Zhan's name trended within seconds, and though he had not spoken yet, The world seemed to feel the echo of Yibo's words reaching out toward him like a long-delayed message finally delivered. Industry insiders whispered that this was not a careless confession but a carefully measured truth, one that allowed Yibo to honor the past without reigniting the fires of chaos. They noted that his voice had carried no bitterness, no tension, no suggestion of unresolved conflict. Instead, it carried the weight of someone who had lived through a story too big for two people to contain and had come out on the other side with clarity, acceptance, and a quiet kind of peace. As the interview concluded, Wang Yibo stood slowly, shook the interviewer's hand, and stepped away from the spotlight with the same calmness with which he had entered. Yet something had shifted in him, something the cameras had caught but could not fully explain. He walked with a sense of release, of closure, of having finally freed himself from a narrative that had clung to him for years. And somewhere, in another part of the city, Xiao Zhan would soon hear his words, feel the sincerity in them, and perhaps understand that this moment was not a reopening of old wounds but a gentle closure, offered with respect. And as fans waited for Xiao Zhan's eventual response, one thing became undeniable: the truth Wang Yibo had finally spoken was not the end of their story, but the beginning of a quieter, more honest chapter, one written not in spotlight glare, but in the soft, unguarded spaces where real connections survive even the loudest storms. The question that echoed across every corner of the entertainment industry that night was not simply why Wang Yibo had broken his silence, but what finally pushed him to speak after years of rumors, speculation, and unresolved tension surrounding his connection to Xiao Zhan, because for so long both actors maintained a calculated stillness, an immaculate silence that shielded them from controversy but fueled endless theories, leaving fans, reporters, insiders, and critics trapped in an endless cycle of guessing and re-guessing what truly existed between the two most powerful names in modern Chinese entertainment. But when Wang Yibo finally decided to address the situation, the timing, the tone, and the raw emotional weight behind his statement sent shockwaves far beyond fan communities and into the very core of the industry itself, shaking managers, reshaping alliances, and forcing entertainment executives to reconsider the narrative they had carefully constructed for years. It began quietly, so quietly in fact that most people did not even realize they were witnessing the start of something historic. During a late-night backstage interview after a major awards ceremony, reporters gathered in a dimly lit corridor lined with heavy curtains, waiting for the next celebrity to appear. They expected short answers, routine comments about styling, upcoming projects, and generic appreciation for fans. What they did not expect was Wang Yibo stepping forward with an expression so serious, so unguarded, that the journalists closest to him felt the temperature of the room shift. He stood perfectly still, shoulders squared, eyes focused, the faintest hint of exhaustion visible in the subtle downturn of his lips. For a moment, the cameras didn't flash. The room simply held its breath. Then he spoke. Not with the rehearsed confidence of a promotional appearance, not with the detached caution of a carefully managed public statement, but with a quiet, deliberate honesty that seemed to rise from a place he had protected for years. He said he was tired of the rumors, tired of the false narratives, tired of people weaponizing his silence to create stories that had never belonged to him. His voice did not waver, but there was an unmistakable strain beneath the calmness, the kind of tension that builds only after long periods of swallowing one's truth. Behind the cameras, reporters exchanged startled glances. This was not the Wang Yibo the public knew, the cool, controlled performer who spoke rarely and revealed even less. This was someone standing on the edge of transparency, choosing to speak not because he was asked, but because he could no longer remain silent. He continued, explaining that every rumor linking him to conflicts, betrayals, jealousy, and secret grudges with Xiao Zhan had been twisted into something grotesque, something that bore no resemblance to reality. He said that silence was never a confession, and that distance was not the same as division. He acknowledged that both he and Xiao Zhan had endured pressures no ordinary person could comprehend, pressures created by mass expectations, by the aftermath of controversies, by the weight of being symbols rather than human beings. He admitted that the world had tried to turn them into rivals, into enemies, into puppets performing a narrative written by strangers. And then, with a slow, steady breath that seemed to anchor the room, he revealed the truth that no one expected. He said he had never once considered Xiao Zhan an opponent. Not during their rise, not during their separate careers, not during the darkest periods when silence felt safer than honesty. He said he respected him, admired his resilience, and understood the burden of being adored and condemned by millions in the same breath. He said that someone's public absence does not equate to private distance, and someone's refusal to speak does not equate to coldness, indifference, or resentment.